Donovan Hayes stood in the kitchen of his midtown apartment at 6:47 p.m. on a Friday, holding divorce papers that felt heavier than any tool in his hangar. His white shirt still carried faint traces of hydraulic fluid despite 3 washes. The apartment smelled like the pasta marinara he'd been cooking before the world ended. Garlic and basil now turned bitter in the air. Ainsley Whitmore Hayes, soon to be just Whitmore again, stood by the door in a cream Armani dress he'd never seen before. Designer luggage beside her, the kind that cost more than his monthly truck payment. Ford Kensington waited in the hallway, keys to his Porsche Cayenne jingling like loose change in expensive pockets. The dinner Sunday is just closure, Donovan. Ainsley's eyes fixed somewhere past his left shoulder, the way people look at furniture they're planning to donate. My family wants to see we're handling this amicably. Ford suggested the Capitol Grill, 7 o'clock, but Ainsley didn't know. 4 days earlier, Donovan had signed incorporation papers making him 42% owner of Peachtree Executive Aviation. $11.3 million valuation. 9 years of sweat equity plus $340,000 in cash he'd saved. Dollar by dollar, shift by shift, flight by flight. The Cessna Citation M2 registered under Hayes Aviation LLC sat in Hangar 12 at Peachtree DeKalb Airport, paid off except for the strategic note he carried for tax purposes. In 68 hours at Ainsley's closure dinner, his phone would ring. A Gulfstream G280 carrying a senator's wife would declare in-flight emergency. Donovan would be called to PDK Airport as ground operations chief and backup captain. And Ainsley would watch her grease monkey husband command a $28 million jet to safe landing while a United States senator thanked him for saving his wife's life 6 months prior. But to understand how a postal worker's son became invisible to his own wife while building an aviation empire, the story needed to go back 9 years to a coffee shop in Grant Park where 2 people met and decided they recognized something in each other that turned out to be completely different things. 9 years ago, Donovan was 26 and working the graveyard shift as apprentice aircraft mechanic at Peachtree DeKalb Airport. His studio apartment off Buford Highway had walls thin enough to hear his neighbor's television through the drywall. The 1997 Toyota Camry in the parking lot burned oil and needed new strakes, but it got him to work and to night classes where he studied for his A&P license and commercial pilot certification. Sleep happened in 4-hour blocks between engine overhauls and FAA regulation memorization. Ainsley Whitmore was 23, junior marketing coordinator at a boutique agency downtown. White, blonde, raised in Buckhead with the kind of unconscious privilege that came from never wondering if you belonged in a room. She'd meet Donovan at Octane Coffee in Grant Park on a Tuesday morning, when the autumn light came through the windows at angles that made everything look like it meant something. Donovan had claimed the corner table with his FAA manual spread open, highlighter moving across regulations about turbine engine maintenance intervals. Coffee gone cold an hour ago. Ainsley sketched campaign concepts in a moleskin notebook 3 tables over, periodically glancing up at the chalkboard menu like the answer to her creative block might be written between cold brew and cortado. Aviation manuals? She'd moved to his table without asking, pointing at the book with her pen. Are you a pilot? Working on it. Right now I just keep them in the air. That's actually the important part, isn't it? She smiled like she'd discovered something rare, the invisible work that matters. Tell that to people when they ask what I do. They hear mechanic and their eyes glaze over. Like I change oil in Hondas. Not mine. And her eyes stayed locked on his with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in years. The first year moved fast, Ainsley fascinated by Donovan's precision, the way his hands could diagnose engine problems by sound alone. How he talked about aircraft systems like other people talked about art, reverent, detailed, alive with passion for the hidden complexity. Donovan drawn to her creativity, how she could look at a blank page and see campaigns that would make people feel things, how she believed in his aviation dreams when his own family kept asking when he'd get a real job with benefits. Her Buckhead friends were curious about the airport guy. His friends from DeKalb were skeptical of the Buckhead princess. But in that first year, none of it mattered because they were building something neither of them had names for yet. Thanksgiving of year one brought the first crack, though Donovan didn't recognize it then. Vivian Whitmore met him at her Tuxedo Road estate, with a handshake so cold it could have flash-frozen turbine fuel. The house was old Atlanta money, terra-crossed with a museum, all antiques and ancestors watching from oil paintings on walls that whispered about bloodlines and proper society. "And what does your father do, Donovan?" "Postal carrier, ma'am. 32 years with USPS before his stroke." "How industrious." The word landed like a judge's gavel. Industrious. Not impressive. Not accomplished. Industrious the way you'd describe ants or assembly lines. Caldwell Whitmore was warmer but distant, the kind of man who'd learned to let his wife run the social program. "Air Force pilot back in my day. Korea. You fly, son?" "Learning to, sir. Got my private pilot certificate last month." "Good. Stick with it. Flying gets in your blood." Brief moment of connection before Vivian's presence pulled Caldwell back to his assigned corner. Later that night, after Donovan left, Vivian's voice carried through the heating vents to where Ainsley was retrieving her purse. "Darling, he's very earnest, but is this really the direction you're heading?" Ainsley defended him then. That changed. Years 2 through 4 were the building years. Donovan advanced through certifications like he was trying to prove something to himself. A&P license, airframe and power plant, the foundation credentials, inspection authorization, which meant he could sign off on annual inspections that kept aircraft legal to fly. Commercial pilot multi-engine rating, instrument rating. Started flying charter part-time when Captain Mateo Rivera needed backup pilots for overnight medical runs. Rivera was 41 then, Latino, co-founder of Peachtree Executive Aviation with quiet eyes that missed nothing. He'd watched Donovan for 2 years before calling him into the hangar office on a night when rain hammered the metal roof and made conversation feel like confession. "Donovan, I've watched you for 2 years. You're the best technician I've seen under 30, and you fly smoother than captains with 5,000 hours. That combination is rare. Most pilots don't want grease under their nails. Most mechanics don't have the temperament for cockpit decisions." Donovan waited. Rivera didn't waste words. "I want to offer you partnership track, 9-year sweat equity program. Every hour of below-market technical work builds equity credit. When you're ready financially, you buy in for remaining percentage up to 42% ownership." The number hung between them like a promise and a test. Donovan went home to their apartment. They'd moved in together by then and told Ainsley over leftover Chinese food at their IKEA table. "This is it. Mateo's offering me partnership. 9 years, I could own almost half a company worth $8 million right now." Ainsley's phone was face up on the table. Notifications lighting the screen every few seconds. "That's nice, honey. 9 years is a long time, though." Nice. Like he'd told her about a decent parking spot or a sale on bread. The first dismissal. Donovan noted it the way pilots note warning lights. Acknowledge, monitor, continue. He proposed in year 4 at sunset on Stone Mountain's summit. The diamond was modest because modest was all a mechanic's salary allowed, even when you worked 70-hour weeks. But the view was free and the moment felt infinite. Ainsley said yes immediately, her hair catching the last gold light like a shampoo commercial. "We'll build something beautiful together, Donovan." The wedding happened 6 months later. Small ceremony because Donovan's family was small, his father in a wheelchair post-stroke, his sister flying in from Denver, a handful of postal worker colleagues who'd known him since childhood. The Whitmore side filled their half of the venue with people whose names appeared on buildings and in newspaper society pages. Vivian smiled for photos, but Donovan caught her conversation with a woman in a purple hat near the champagne fountain. Well, Ainsley always did have a rebellious streak. Let's hope she grows out of it. Years 5 and 6 were good at first. Donovan worked 65-hour weeks, mechanic days, charter flights, nights, and weekends. His sweat equity credit built steadily. 40,000 by year 5, 95,000 by year 6. Ainsley rose at her agency from account manager to senior strategist. Her salary hit 98,000. His combined income from wrenching and flying added to 99,000. Almost parallel lives, almost equal footing. The drift started in year 6 when Ainsley made director of digital strategy. New title brought new social circles. Agency executives who summered in Provence. Tech startup founders who talked about disruption like it was poetry. Venture capital associates who measured worth in exit multiples. Friday nights became wine bars in Buckhead. Gallery openings where installation art cost more than Donovan's truck. Rooftop lounges where cocktails had names like Deconstructed Manhattan and came with fog. Donovan's Friday nights meant late charter returns. 11 p.m. landings after flying sick patients to specialists or executives to deal closings. Drive home exhausted with the smell of jet fuel in his hair and hydraulic fluid under his nails despite industrial soap. The apartment would be empty, or Ainsley would be asleep, or she'd be awake scrolling her phone with wine-stained lips and stories about people whose names Donovan didn't recognize doing things that sounded like performance art. The gap widened like a crack in a turbine blade, invisible at first, then structural. Year 7 brought Ford Kensington into their lives like weather nobody predicted. Vivian's goddaughter's ex-boyfriend, investment banker at Kensington and Trask, a family firm that had been managing old Atlanta money since Reconstruction. 42 years old, never married, collected vintage cars the way some people collected stamps. He appeared at the Whitmore Christmas party wearing a suit that cost more than Donovan's monthly salary, and a smile that suggested he'd never been told no about anything that mattered. Ainsley's husband. Finally meet the aviation man. Ford's handshake was calculated pressure, not hostile, but measuring. Do you fly? Mainly charter work, medical work. I'm a pilot. What's your name? Donovan. What's your call sign? 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 Donovan. What's your do you fly? Mainly charter work, medical transports, executive runs, Learjets, citations, hawkers. Fascinating. I've always wanted to take lessons but never found the time. Too busy managing portfolios. Laugh that invited everyone to join his amusement. Different kind of flying, I suppose. The tone communicated everything. Your flying is a hobby. My work is real. You play with machines, I move markets. Vivian beamed at Ford in a way she'd never beamed at Donovan. Not once in 6 years. Ford's presence increased through year 7 into year 8. Suddenly, at every Whitmore event, dinners, fundraisers, country club brunches, investment opportunities for Ainsley's agency, lunch meetings to discuss Ainsley's retirement planning, though she was 29 and retirement seemed like discussing Mars colonization. Ainsley came home later, checked her phone constantly. New wardrobe appeared. Designer labels Donovan's salary couldn't fund. He noticed, said nothing, kept working. Because confrontation required evidence and energy, and he was spending all his energy building something that would matter when the confrontation finally came. The requests started in year 8, month 2. Small at first. Donovan, my car's transmission is going. I need something reliable. $11,000 down payment for a certified pre-owned Lexus ES. Safety mattered. He pulled it from his partnership fund without argument. The account dropped from $218,000 to $207,000. Month 4 brought the investment opportunity. Ford mentioned this condo flip. Just need $18,000 earnest money. Flips in 60 days, we make $8,000 profit. Donovan hesitated. He was 9 months from partnership buy-in. Every dollar mattered. But Ainsley's face carried that expression he'd learned meant she was measuring him against some invisible standard he kept failing. Ainsley, I'm saving for the partnership buy-in. I need every... So your partnership matters, but our financial future doesn't? Her voice had edges now, sharp enough to cut. Ford says this is a guaranteed return, but I guess you know better than someone who went to Wharton. He gave in. $18,000. The condo deal fell through 2 weeks later. Ford kept the money as a consulting fee for his time and expertise. Partnership fund, $189,000, needed $340,000 for buy-in. Month 6 brought country club initiation. Mom's paying most of it, but we need to show $7,500 good faith. Ainsley, we don't even play golf. It's not about golf, Donovan. It's about my family's social standing, about being part of something. The way she said my family instead of our family felt like a door closing. He gave her $3,750. Vivian paid the rest while making clear Donovan should have covered it all. A man provides for his wife's social position. A real man. What Donovan didn't know, Ainsley had withdrawn $12,000 from their joint account in month 5. Investment with Ford, money Donovan never tracked because he trusted her and because he was working 70-hour weeks and because trust was supposed to mean not checking. Total extraction by month 10, $56,750 from Donovan, plus $12,000 from joint account. $68,750 funneled toward a life with Ford or into Ford's pockets or into some combination that would become clear later when federal investigators started counting. The disrespect that had been subtle became public in year 8. The agency holiday party in month 8, rooftop venue in Buckhead with views of the city like a circuit board of lights. Donovan came straight from the airport in his pilot uniform. White shirt, black slacks, epaulettes, wings, professional, clean, the uniform that should have communicated competence. Ainsley's colleague approached with the enthusiasm of someone who watches Top Gun too often. "Oh, wow, you're a pilot. That's so cool. What airline?" "Charter aviation, medical flights, executive." Ainsley cut in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He mostly does maintenance. Flying is occasional." The lie landed like a slap. Donovan was flying 30-plus hours monthly, maintaining 40. The flying was becoming his primary role, but Ainsley needed him to be the mechanic, needed him small enough to fit the story she was telling herself about why Ford made sense. Ford appeared from the bar holding 3 drinks with the ease of someone who'd never worried about the cost of anything. Donovan, the working man, extended a $20 bill. Hey, could you grab us another round? Bar's that way, buddy. Treated him like waitstaff at his wife's company party. Ainsley said nothing, smiled weakly. Let it happen. Donovan took the 20, walked to the bar, ordered the drinks, kept the change, and left early. Drove home through Friday night traffic thinking about the difference between being small and being made small. The Whitmore Sunday brunch in month 9. Family tradition at Vivian's estate. Donovan arrived 40 minutes late because he'd been flying Senator Harrison Drummond's wife to Mayo Clinic through the night. Emergency stroke protocol. Landed at 6 a.m., drove straight to the hospital to ensure ground transport connected smoothly. Then home to shower 3 times because the aircraft cabin smell clung to skin like smoke. Still faintly smelled like jet fuel when he walked into Vivian's dining room. Donovan, darling, perhaps shower before Sunday brunches? Vivian's voice carried to every corner, loud enough to stop conversation. The industrial aroma is quite strong. Caldwell shifted uncomfortably, said nothing, never said anything when his wife drew blood. Ford was there. Again, arm casually draped on the back of Ainsley's chair with the presumption of someone who'd already won. Vivian, the eggs royale are exquisite. Reminds me of brunch at our place in Kiowa. Vivian beamed. Absolutely radiated approval at Ford's appreciation of her cooking and his casual mention of South Carolina real estate. Sloane's engagement party came in month 10, 1 week before Ainsley filed papers. Younger sister Sloane marrying Preston, a hedge fund analyst with the kind of confidence that came from never being wrong about anything because the market always eventually proved you right if you had enough money to wait it out. The party at Cherokee Town Club. Place cards at the dinner table read Ainsley Whitmore next to guest. Not Donovan Hayes. Not Ainsley and Donovan. Guest, like he was +1 she'd met that afternoon. Seating arrangement put Ainsley next to Ford. Donovan at the far end with Sloane's college friends who were surprised to learn Ainsley was married because she never mentioned a husband. And the seating chart said guest. Conversation from the head table drifted down between courses. Ford's voice to Ainsley, quiet but not quiet enough. Eventually you have to choose the life you deserve or the life you settled for. Ainsley's response came after a pause that felt like falling. I know. I'm working on it. Donovan heard everything, made no scene, finished his salmon, complimented Sloane on the venue, drove home alone while Ainsley stayed for after-party drinks with family and Ford. That night he didn't sleep, sat in the living room watching headlights move across the ceiling and thinking about the difference between being chosen and being settled for. Wondering when exactly Ainsley had started measuring him against an imaginary standard he'd never been told about and couldn't meet because it kept changing. Month 10, day 23 brought the crisis. Rivera's partner wanted immediate exit. Personal reasons, divorce, health, some combination that meant the partnership structure needed to change now instead of waiting for the planned timeline. New deadline, 10 days, needed $340,000 cash immediately. Donovan's savings after Ainsley's withdrawals, $281,000 short by $59,000. Bank would bridge loan it. Donovan's credit was perfect. Company financials were strong. He had clear equity position and 9 years of payment history showing reliability. But the loan required spouse co-signature because married meant joint assets and joint liability, and banks wanted both signatures on anything over $50,000. He asked Ainsley in their living room at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday. She was scrolling her phone, wine glass leaving rings on the coffee table where coasters sat unused. Ainsley, I need you to co-sign this bridge loan. 60-day term, banks already approved it based on my... No. Flat, final, like a door slamming. What? Ainsley, this is the partnership. 9 years of... Your partnership, your dream. When is it about US, Donovan? This is us. This is our future financial. Our future? She set the phone down, eyes hot with something that looked like years of compressed resentment finding an exit. Donovan, look at yourself. You're 35 years old. You smell like aircraft grease. You work 70 hours a week for what? For some dream that'll never be real? The words kept coming like turbine failure, sudden, catastrophic, irreversible. I'm done. I've been done for months. Silence filled the space between them. The refrigerator hummed. A car alarm went off 3 blocks away. How long? Donovan's voice came out quieter than he intended. How long what? How long have you been seeing Ford? Her face confirmed everything before her mouth opened. The micro-expression that flashed, guilt, relief, defiance, told the whole story. 10 months. 10 months. While Donovan worked overnight medical charters, while he saved every dollar, while he believed in our future, 10 months of lies stacked on lies until the structure couldn't hold weight anymore. Ainsley's justification poured out like rehearsed testimony. Ford is established. He has a real career, real wealth. He took me to Napa last month, business trip, but still. When's the last time we went anywhere? I was flying Senator Drummond's wife to Mayo Clinic for emergency surgery. That's when. Exactly. You're always working. Ford makes time for life. He has balance. He has... She stopped, maybe realizing she was making his case for him. Donovan stood, moved to the window. Atlanta lights spread out like promises nobody kept. I see. Donovan, we're not happy. You have to admit that. You're married to your job and You're just what you've always been, Ainsley. Your mother's daughter. She flinched. Direct hit. That's not fair. It's completely fair. Vivian decided 9 years ago I wasn't good enough because my father delivered mail. You defended me then, but somewhere along the way you started measuring me the same way. Blue collar versus white collar. Grease under nails versus clean hands. Building something versus having it handed to you. That's not what this is about. Then what's it about? Because it feels like it's about Ford having the right last name and the right family firm and the right kind of wealth that doesn't smell like hydraulic fluid. Ainsley grabbed her purse, started for the door, turned back with tears that might have been real or might have been performance. Hard to tell after 9 years of learning someone's faces. The papers will be filed Monday. Please don't make this ugly. She left. The door clicked shut with the finality of a cockpit door locking before takeoff. Donovan stood in the apartment that suddenly felt like a museum of a relationship that had died months ago, but nobody had called time of death. Wedding photo on the mantel. Ainsley's smile in that picture genuine, joyful, full of belief in possibilities. When had that changed? Month by month or all at once? The next morning brought divorce papers served at the airport. Ford helped Ainsley move her things in his Porsche Cayenne. Donovan watched from the hangar office window as they loaded boxes. Ford's hand on the small of Ainsley's back with the presumption of ownership. Ainsley laughing at something Ford said with a lightness Donovan hadn't seen in years. Rivera found Donovan still at the window an hour after they'd left. You okay? Getting there. The partnership, the timeline. I know. I'll figure it out. Rivera pulled out his checkbook, started writing, tore off the check and set it on the desk between them. $59,000. Mateo, I can't. Interest-free. Pay me back from first-year dividends. Rivera's voice carried no room for argument. You've earned this 10 times over, Donovan, and besides, slight smile, grim around the edges. You're about to show your wife exactly who she married, exactly what she's losing. The partnership closed on Friday, 3 days before Ainsley's closure dinner. Incorporation papers signed in a lawyer's office that smelled like furniture polish and old books. Donovan Hayes, 42% beneficial owner, Peachtree Executive Aviation ELLC. The lawyer walked him through the assets like reading a will for someone still alive. 3 Gulfstream G280GOs valued at $28 million each, 2 Learjet 75s at $14 million each. Hangar facilities appraised at $2.1 million. Maintenance contracts generating $18 million annual revenue. The Cessna Citation M2 registered under Hayes Aviation LC. His personal aircraft, $4.8 million, financed strategically for tax purposes but effectively owned outright. Donovan's equity value, $4.7 million. Annual profit share projection, $380,000 first year, scaling to $850,000 plus by year 3. Rivera's retirement plan came with a handshake that felt like benediction. 18 months, I'm out. Months. You'll have right of first refusal to buy my 58% at valuation. You'll be majority owner before you're 40, Donovan. That night, Donovan sat in his apartment with the incorporation papers spread on the table. Everything he'd worked for, everything Ainsley had dismissed as grease and dreams. The phone buzzed with a text from Imani, Washington, his neighbor 2 doors down. ICU nurse, single mom, friend who'd watched the marriage disintegrate from the outside with the clarity of someone not emotionally invested. Saw the moving truck. You okay? Getting there. She know about the partnership? I tried telling her 6 years ago. She wasn't interested. Her loss. You're building something real. Imani knocked on his door 20 minutes later with beer and leftover pizza. They sat on his balcony watching the city lights and not talking about the obvious until the silence made talking necessary. You gonna go to this dinner thing? Probably should. Face it directly. Don't go small. Imani's eyes were serious in a way that made the words land. Don't apologize for who you are. And don't tell them what you've built. Show them. Sunday morning arrived with the weight of finale. Donovan showered 3 times, scrubbed until no trace of jet fuel remained, until his skin was red and raw and clean enough to pass Vivian's industrial aroma test. Pressed his only good suit, charcoal gray, $450 off rack from 2 years ago. Wedding ring still on left hand, hadn't removed it yet, wasn't sure why. The drive to Buckhead took him through neighborhoods that got progressively wealthier until the houses disappeared behind gates and the cars in driveways cost more than most people's annual salary. The Capitol Grill valet looked at his Honda Civic with the expression usually reserved for someone tracking mud on white carpet, parked it in the far corner of the lot where it wouldn't offend the Mercedes and BMW sensibilities. Inside at 7:04. Ainsley's party already seated at a long table by the windows. The assembled cast, Ainsley in a Diane von Furstenberg dress, new jewelry catching light, Ford in bespoke navy, Patek Philippe visible when he gestured. Vivian dripping Chanel and disapproval in equal measure. Caldwell uncomfortable with whiskey already working on his discomfort, Sloan and Preston. 2 of Ainsley's agency colleagues whose names Donovan had heard but never retained. Every head turned as Donovan approached. Ford stood first with a smile that belonged in a shark documentary. Extended hand for a shake calibrated to assert dominance. Donovan, glad you could make it, buddy. Ainsley and I wanted everyone to see we're handling this separation like adults. Ainsley's voice carried the bright false cheer of someone performing maturity. Everyone, this is Donovan. This is my soon-to-be ex-husband. Introduced like a former employee. Someone dismissed. Someone whose name would fade from company memory in 6 months. The dinner proceeded as orchestrated cruelty disguised as civilized conversation. Vivian opened with a toast to new beginnings and lessons learned, the kind that marry for partnership, not charity. Some lessons take time. Glance at Donovan that communicated you were the lesson my daughter had to learn. Ford performed with the ease of someone who'd never doubted his welcome anywhere. So Donovan, still wrenching at the airport? Aircraft maintenance and charter flying. Right. Honest work. My grandfather was a mechanic. Never made much, but he died happy. That's what counts. The comparison hung there. You'll die poor but satisfied, like my grandfather who fixed things for people who mattered. Ainsley's colleague tried kindness. Donovan flies? That's impressive, Ainsley corrected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Occasionally, mostly he does technical work, maintenance, inspections, that sort of thing. Another lie. Donovan had logged 220 flight hours in the last 6 months, but Ainsley needed him to be the mechanic, needed him small enough to justify Ford. The wealth comparison arrived with dessert menus, Sloan to Ford about holiday plans. St. Bart's. I have a place there. Nothing fancy, just 4 bedrooms on the beach. Spring plans. Thinking Paris, Ainsley's never seen Provence properly. All eyes drifted to Donovan. The unspoken question, what could you ever give her? Preston tried friendly conversation. What kind of aircraft do you work on? Mainly Gulfstreams, some Learjets, Citations. Ford interrupted with a laugh that invited everyone to join his amusement. Fancy names for fancy machines. But at the end of the day, it's still grease and wrenches, right, Don? Blue-collar nobility. Said like a slur, like an indictment, like proof of everything Ainsley had been right to leave behind. Donovan's phone rang as creme brulee arrived. Captain Rivera, emergency. Excuse me, I need to take this. Ford's voice carried across the restaurant. Let me guess, someone's cesspool backed up? The table laughed. Ainsley smiled. Performance successful. Donovan stepped outside into Buckhead air that tasted like old money and new betrayal. Mateo? Rivera's stress came through the line like turbulence. Donovan, we have a situation. Senator Drummond's wife, stroke, in-flight emergency. They're diverting to PDK. I need you there now. You're our best on Gulfstream systems and your backup pilot rated on the 280. Can you make it? 15 minutes. Returned to the table, placed $50 by his plate. More than his share, but who was counting? I have to go. Work emergency. Ford's laugh had sharp edges. On a Sunday night? What, someone's air conditioner broke on their private jet? The life of a service worker? Ainsley's eyes gleamed with something that looked like victory. Oh, actually, we were planning to see where you work after dinner. Everyone's curious. This was the plan all along. Sunday night, 7 p.m. dinner. She'd known his schedule, known medical charters often ran Sundays. Get him to the airport, show her family the hangars, the grease, the manual labor. Final proof she'd upgraded to someone whose work didn't leave stains. Vivian clapped hands together. What a delightful idea. I've never seen an aircraft hangar. Ford stood, straightening his suit. Very authentic tourism. I'm in. Donovan met Ainsley's eyes across the table, saw the cruelty there, the calculation, the trap she'd spent days constructing. Sure, follow me. Because sometimes the best response to a trap is walking straight into it, when you're holding cards they don't know exist, when you know that in 15 minutes their world is going to shift on its axis, and you're going to be the one doing the shifting. The procession to Peachtree DeKalb Airport looked like a parade of inequality. Ford's Porsche Cayenne with vanity plate KENS1GT, Vivian's Mercedes GLS 600, Ainsley's Lexus that Donovan had bought, Caldwell's BMW 740i, Sloan and Preston's Audi Q7, and leading them all, Donovan's Honda Civic with 197,000 miles and a check engine light he'd been meaning to address for 3 months. Ford behind him probably FaceTiming someone about slumming at an airport garage, probably laughing about blue-collar field trips, probably already composing the story he'd tell at the club about the time he humored his girlfriend's ex-husband by visiting his little airplane garage. Donovan drove through Sunday night traffic thinking about 9 years. 9 years of Ainsley seeing mechanic and stopping there, never asking about the Gulfstreams, never watching him fly, never understanding that every landing meant lives in his hands. Never caring to know because knowing would have complicated the story she needed to tell herself about why she deserved better. His phone buzzed. Rivera. Senator's ETA 22 minutes. Play this right, son. Arrival at Peachtree DeKalb Airport at 7:52. Private terminal lit up like a stage set. 3 jets on the tarmac under floodlights. Ground crews moving with the coordinated precision of people who knew that mistakes at this level meant funerals. Fuel trucks. Emergency vehicles staging for medical diversion protocol. Donovan badged through security. His credentials got the entire group cleared. The look on the security officer's face when he saw Donovan's badge level, Operations Chief, Pilot Authority, Unrestricted Access, was the first crack in the evening's foundation. Ford stepping out of his Porsche into jet fuel air and tarmac reality. Actual planes. I assumed it'd be like a garage with propellers. Vivian wrinkling her nose. Does it always smell this industrial? Ainsley's colleague looking around at the machinery and the noise. It's so loud, is this normal? Donovan ignored them, walked toward Hangar 12 with the certainty of someone who owned the ground under his feet. His hangar, his company, his world they were about to enter without knowing the rules had already changed. Inside, 2 Gulfstream G280Gs in company livery, white with blue stripe, each aircraft worth more than most people's houses. 1 Learjet 75 in the maintenance bay, engine exposed like open heart surgery. 1 Cessna Citation M2 polished to mirror finish, registration number N. 749er 2 hotel, mechanics working, glancing up, nodding respect to Donovan in a way that communicated hierarchy without words. Ford's voice carried false appreciation. Wow, these are actually nice aircraft. Must be worth what, a few million? Ainsley loud enough for Donovan to hear. See, I told you, it's impressive work. He's good at what he does. Patronizing, like praising a child's crayon drawing, like acknowledging competence in someone who would never matter because competence without pedigree was just skilled labor. Donovan grabbed a headset, marshalling wands, all business now. The Gulfstream G280 medical charter on final approach. Navigation lights cutting through darkness like intention. He marshaled the aircraft to parking with hand signals practiced 10,000 times. Perfect precision, total confidence. This was his element. This was the world where he spoke the language and everyone else was tourist. Behind him, conversation died. They watched Donovan work, watched him command a $28 million aircraft to exact positioning with gestures, watched ground crew respond to his authority without question. Sloan whispered to Ainsley, I didn't know he actually did this. I've never seen him work before. Ainsley's voice barely audible. Neither have I. The aircraft door opened, stairs deployed. First out, Dr. Helena Strauss, Mayo Clinic neurologist, carrying the weight of someone who'd spent 6 hours keeping a patient stable at altitude. Then Senator Harrison Drummond, 61 years old, 18 years in the Senate, face known from CNN and committee hearings. Then the patient on a mobile gurney, Senator's wife Miranda, stable but monitored. Finally, Captain Mateo Rivera in full pilot uniform, 4 stripes communicating captain authority. Senator Drummond saw Donovan, his face transformed with relief. Walked directly past the assembled Whitmore family like they were scenery. Grabbed Donovan's hand with both of his in the kind of handshake that meant something. Donovan Hayes, thank God you're here. Is everything ready for turnaround? Not employer-employee, not service provider-client, equals partners. People who'd shared cockpit stress and life and death decisions. And Ainsley's world started to crack. Senator Drummond turned to the assembled Whitmore family with the casual authority of someone used to commanding rooms. His voice carried across the hangar floor over the ambient hum of ventilation systems and distant aircraft engines. Folks, I don't know your relationship to Donovan, but you should know this man saved my wife's life, twice. Vivian's champagne-induced confidence evaporated. I'm sorry, what? The senator's smile was warm, genuine, the kind that came from gratitude rather than political necessity. 6 months ago, Miranda and I were flying commercial Atlanta to Phoenix. She had stroke symptoms at 35,000 feet. Pilot diverted to Little Rock, but she needed specialized care immediately. He turned to Donovan with the ease of old friendship. Donovan was off duty that day. Got the emergency call, drove to the airport in the middle of the night, pre-flighted a Gulfstream in 14 minutes, fastest I've ever witnessed. Flew us to Mayo Clinic in Rochester. 3-hour flight through weather that would have grounded most pilots. Miranda had surgery within 90 minutes of landing. Dr. Strauss joined the conversation with the clinical precision of someone who dealt in facts rather than feelings. The speed saved her life. Timing in stroke intervention is everything. Every minute of delay increases permanent damage exponentially. Drummond continued, warming to the story. Then tonight, second stroke, in flight from DC. I didn't call the general charter line. I called Peachtree Executive specifically and asked for Donovan Hayes by name. I won't fly with anyone else, not anymore. Vivian's voice came out smaller than usual. But Donovan is a mechanic, not a... Drummond's laugh cut her off, not unkind but corrective. Ma'am, Donovan is an FAA-certified inspection authority. He holds every airframe and power plant rating the FAA issues. He's a charter captain with over 4,200 flight hours. He's not a mechanic. He's one of maybe 50 people in the country who can both fly and fully service aircraft at this certification level. Ford's confident smile developed hairline fractures. Captain Rivera approached the group with the measured stride of someone comfortable in his domain. Salt and pepper hair, weathered hands, quiet eyes that cataloged everything. He noticed the Whitmore contingent with the briefest flicker of understanding. Senator, Mrs. Drummond is stable. Ambulance is ready for Emory transport. Then to Donovan. You brought guests? They wanted to see where I work. Rivera's smile carried layers of meaning, extended his hand to the group. Mateo Rivera, co-founder of Peachtree Executive Aviation. Donovan's my partner. The word partner detonated in the space between them. Ainsley's face drained of color like someone had opened a valve. Her hand went to the table edge for support that wasn't there. Ford recovered first, voice carrying an edge that hadn't been present before. Partner like you own part of this operation? Rivera pulled out his phone with practiced ease, navigating to a screenshot of incorporation documents. The casual preparation suggested this moment had been anticipated, even choreographed. As of Friday, 3 days ago, Donovan owns 42% of the company. Took him 9 years of sweat equity and strategic investing, but he's now my co-owner, full equity partner. Vivian's champagne flute tilted dangerously. Caldwell steadied her elbow without looking, muscle memory from decades of marriage. Preston, the hedge fund analyst, had the involuntary reaction of someone whose brain automatically calculated numbers. Wait, 42% of what valuation? Rivera's smile suggested he'd been waiting for exactly that question. Company's currently valued at $11.3 million. Last quarter net profit was $720,000. Preston's mouth moved silently, doing arithmetic that everyone could see. His eyes widened incrementally. 42% of $720 quarterly profit. That's over $1.2 million annually. The number hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Ford went pale under his expensive tan. The Patek Philippe on his wrist suddenly looked like compensation rather than confirmation. Senator Drummond, oblivious to the family drama unfolding behind him, continued with the enthusiasm of someone who enjoyed talking about flying. Oh, Donovan, did you fly the Citation in tonight? No, sir, drove. The Citation's in Hangar 8 for scheduled maintenance. Ainsley's voice came out barely above a whisper. Citation? Rivera's explanation carried the patient tone of someone educating tourists. Donovan's personal aircraft, Cessna Citation M2. Bought it last year. Smart investment. He finances it strategically for tax purposes and charters it back to the company when he's not using it personally. Creates revenue stream that covers the note plus generates positive cash flow. Vivian found her voice, though it lacked its usual commanding resonance. Personal aircraft? Sloane was already on her phone, fingers moving across the screen with the practiced speed of someone who lived half their life in Google searches. Her face shifted as she found what she was looking for. Citation M2. These sell for $4 to $5 million. Donovan's correction was matter-of-fact, without pride or defensiveness. I paid $4.8 million. Used, low hours, immaculate maintenance history. Charter revenue covers the note plus generates about $8,000 monthly net after expenses. Ainsley's repetition came out like someone learning a foreign language. $4.8 million? Ford's world was imploding in real time, visible in the tightness around his eyes, the way his hand clenched and unclenched at his side. How does a mechanic afford a $5 million plane? Rivera's response carried an edge now, protective of Donovan in a way that suggested deep loyalty. Donovan isn't a mechanic, sir. He's an FAA-certified aircraft technician, inspection authority, and charter captain. He flew 260 hours last quarter at $325 per hour captain rate, plus his equity dividends from company ownership, plus his Citation charter revenue, plus his inspection consulting fees for other operators who need IA sign-offs. Turned back to Donovan, voice warming. Speaking of which, Senator Drummond requested you specifically for tomorrow's return flight to D.C., $9,500 for the round trip. You available? I can do that. The silence that followed had weight and texture, everyone processing at different speeds what the last 5 minutes had revealed. Ford's Patek Philippe suddenly looked like a child's toy. Vivian's judgment seemed premature. Ainsley's upgrade looked more like a lateral move into quicksand. Dr. Strauss approached with a tablet, medical professional even in social settings. Captain Hayes, Mrs. Drummond's husband wanted me to thank you for the diagnostic suggestion 6 months ago. Donovan's humility was reflexive, genuine. Just pattern recognition, Dr. Strauss, not medical advice. She turned to the group with the authoritative clarity of someone used to presenting findings to skeptical audiences. 6 months ago, I mentioned my mother's stroke recovery to Donovan during a charter flight. He suggested, with no medical training, that I investigate a specific clotting disorder based on symptom timeline and family history. He was correct. My mother's alive because Donovan listened when most pilots would have nodded politely and changed the subject. Ainsley's voice barely audible. You never told me about that. Donovan's response came without heat, just tired truth. You never asked about my flights. Rivera was enjoying this now, the pedagogical pleasure of correcting misconceptions. Donovan's flown 487 medical charters in 9 years. Everything from organ transport to stroke emergencies to cardiac arrests in progress. He's seen more in-flight medical scenarios than most ER physicians. He knows what normal looks like, which means he recognizes abnormal faster than people who only see textbook cases. Senator Drummond nodded agreement. And he stays calm. I've been in that cockpit during crisis. Ice water in his veins. His heartbeat probably doesn't get above 70 even when everything's going sideways. Ford made his fatal error, desperation making him stupid. Still, flying isn't exactly rocket science. I mean, it's basically following instruments, right? Autopilot does most of the work. The temperature in the hangar dropped 10 degrees. Captain Rivera's expression hardened into something carved from granite. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd logged 15,000 flight hours and survived situations that killed lesser pilots. Sir, do you know what it takes to be PIC, pilot in command, on a Gulfstream G280? Ford's bravado faltered. I'm sure it's technical, but 4,000 flight hours minimum. Type rating specific to the aircraft, which requires 60 hours of training and practical examination. Annual proficiency checks covering normal and emergency procedures. Recurrent training every 6 months at dedicated facilities. Instrument proficiency check rides. Category 2 and 3 approach authorization for low visibility landings. Medical examination every 6 months including EKG, vision testing, hearing assessment, psychological evaluation. Rivera stepped closer to Ford, not threatening but certainly not backing down. Then there's the technical certification side. Donovan holds inspection authority. That requires 5+ years experience as a certified mechanic, 750+ hours of specialized training, written examinations covering everything from metallurgy to turbine engine dynamics. He can disassemble and rebuild a PT6 turboprop engine without reference manuals. Ford had no response. His mouth opened and closed like a fish processing unexpected air. Donovan's phone buzzed. He checked it with the casual glance of someone used to interruptions. "Mateo, engine warning light on the Learjet. Jake says it's intermittent." Rivera's response came without hesitation. "Your call, your chief of maintenance." The title landed like another bomb. Chief of maintenance, not just partner, not just pilot, leadership. Donovan walked to the Learjet in the maintenance bay, and the Whitmore family followed with the helpless compulsion of people watching a car accident. They couldn't look away now even if they wanted to. The maintenance bay smelled like solvent and metal and the particular kind of cleanliness that came from people who understood that dirt in the wrong place could kill people at altitude. Donovan climbed into the engine bay with practiced efficiency. Movements economical, purposeful. Talked to Jake, a mechanic maybe 25, who deferred to Donovan with the automatic respect that came from hierarchy and earned expertise rather than title. Examined the sensor. Checked computer diagnostics on a tablet Jake handed him. Pointed to specific wiring. "Faulty wiring harness. Replace the whole assembly. Don't patch it. Bird strike probably damaged the shielding during the Little Rock flight last week. Can't see it visually, but the resistance values are off. Pull the entire run from the sensor to the avionics bay and replace it." Jake nodded, making notes. "Got it, boss." Ainsley to Sloan, barely audible. "Boss?" Rivera answered the question she hadn't directed at him. "Donovan is chief of maintenance operations for the company. 4 mechanics report directly to him. When he's not flying, he's running the technical side of the operation. Airworthiness decisions, maintenance scheduling, parts procurement, compliance with FAA regulations. Every aircraft that leaves this facility carries Donovan's signature in the logbook certifying it's safe to fly." Vivian found her voice again, smaller now, confused. "But we were told he was a mechanic." Rivera's response carried no malice, just correction. "He is a mechanic, the best I've ever worked with in 30 years of aviation. But he's also a pilot, inspector, operations chief, and co-owner. Your daughter just never asked which one mattered most." The observation landed like a scalpel, precise and cutting. Ainsley pulled Donovan aside as the group dispersed to examine aircraft with the nervous energy of people who needed something to do with their hands. They moved near Hangar 8, away from listening ears into the space between buildings where the sound of distant aircraft engines created privacy. Her hands were shaking. "Donovan, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Exhaustion colored his response more than anger. The tiredness of explaining something for the 1,000th time to someone who'd never been listening. "I did tell you, Ainsley. 9 years of telling you, you never listened. But the partnership, the plane, the senator, I told you about the partnership track 7 years ago when Mateo first offered it. You were checking Instagram and said, 'That's nice, honey, 9 years is a long time.' I told you when I bought the Citation last year. You were texting Ford and asked if I was done talking because we had dinner plans." He pulled out his phone, navigated to messages, found the thread from 14 months ago, showed her the screen. Donovan's text from April of last year. "Ainsley, closed on the Citation today. This is huge for us financially. The charter revenue alone will cover the note and generate $8,000 monthly passive income, plus the tax advantages of the depreciation schedule. This changes everything for our 5-year plan. Ainsley's response 2 hours later. That's great. Can we talk later? Meeting with Ford about the portfolio thing. She stared at the screen like it contained words in a language she was only now learning to read. Donovan's voice stayed level, almost gentle in its fatalism. I tried telling you I was flying Senator Drummond's wife 6 months ago. You asked if I was done with the airplane stuff because we had 8 p.m. reservations at your mother's club. Ainsley's voice broke. I didn't realize what you were building. I didn't understand. You didn't want to understand. You decided 9 years ago I was just a mechanic. Everything after that, you filtered through that lens, confirmation bias. You saw grease under my nails and stopped looking. Saw the Honda Civic and stopped asking what I was saving for. Heard airport and stopped caring what I actually did there. The truth kept coming like a debrief after a failed flight. Systematic examination of what went wrong and when. You measured me against Ford, against what your mother told you success should look like. Clean hands, right last name, inherited wealth. I was building something from nothing, and that looked small to you because it started small. Because it required patience. Because it smelled like jet fuel. Ainsley tried to speak. Donovan raised a hand, not to silence her, but to finish the thought he'd been carrying for months. If you'd known I was wealthy, you would have stayed. That's what you were about to say. Her silence confirmed it. That's the problem, Ainsley. You didn't love me. You loved the idea of me when you thought I might become something else someday. When I stayed exactly who I always was, someone who works hard, builds things slowly, takes pride in skilled labor regardless of how it looks to Buckhead country clubs, I wasn't good enough. Ainsley's tears started, mascara tracking down her cheeks in ways that would have horrified her if she'd had access to a mirror. Donovan, we haven't finalized anything. We can fix this. I see now You see the money. That's not fair. It's completely fair. His voice stayed calm, which somehow made the words cut deeper. You chose Ford because you thought he was richer, more prestigious, more worthy of Vivian's approval. That's not a mistake. That's character. That's values expressing themselves when tested. The devastation on her face might have moved him 6 months ago. Now it just looked like someone realizing they'd bet on the wrong horse and the race was over. I made a mistake. Please. We built 9 years together. You built 9 years of keeping me small. You introduced me as works at the airport instead of pilot. You told your colleagues I occasionally fly when flying was becoming my primary role. You lied about who I am because the truth embarrassed you in front of people whose opinions mattered more than mine. Ainsley tried a different approach, voice going small and desperate. I was wrong. I was so wrong. But we can fix. Donovan's voice softened, which somehow made the rejection more final. Ainsley, here's the worst part. I would have given you all of this anyway. The partnership, the wealth, the life you wanted. We could have built it together. I wanted to build it together. But you needed me to be less than you. You needed embarrassment as emotional fuel. You needed to feel like you were settling so that leaving felt like liberation instead of betrayal. Ford's voice carried from the hangar, petulant and demanding. Ainsley, let's go. I have a conference call in an hour. Sunday night, 9 p.m., and Ford had conference calls. The lie was transparent to everyone except possibly Ford himself. Ainsley winced at his tone, heard for the first time how he talked to her, how his voice carried the same dismissive edge she'd used when describing Donovan's work to her friends. He talks to you the way you talked about me. Donovan's observation landed clinical, diagnostic. You notice? She did. The recognition crossed her face like weather. Go. Ford's waiting. Can I call you? To talk about? The lawyers will handle everything. He walked back toward the hangar, leaving her standing between buildings in Buckhead air that had somehow gotten colder. Didn't look back because looking back suggested there was something left to see. Rivera found Donovan in the hangar office 20 minutes after the Whitmore convoy had departed, their expensive cars disappearing into Buckhead like they'd never been there. Rivera carried a folder, the kind that held things people didn't want to carry in their heads. "You handled that with class. Proud of you. Thanks for the backup." Rivera set the folder on the desk between them like evidence. "About that, I made some calls about Ford Kensington. Mateo, you didn't have to. I know a compliance officer at SunTrust. We go back to Air Force days. Ford's name came up in conversation. Donovan, this man is dirty in ways that are about to become very public." The folder opened to reveal printouts of regulatory filings, bank compliance reports, things that should have been confidential but somehow weren't, when people owed each other favors from decades of friendship. Rivera's contact had provided off-record information that painted a picture of systematic fraud. Ford was under active federal investigation for unauthorized client fund transfers totaling $3.1 million across 34 separate accounts. Misrepresentation of investment risk, telling clients about guaranteed 12% returns when no legitimate investment could guarantee such numbers. Possible Ponzi structure. Classic rob Peter to pay Paul scheme where early investors got paid with new investor money rather than actual returns. Multiple counts of wire fraud pending. Federal investigators had been building the case for 7 months. 7 months. Right when Ford had escalated his pursuit of Ainsley from casual interest to full court press. Rivera's finger traced the timeline on one of the documents. He was running. Needed fresh capital. Ainsley's salary, her family's connections, access to Vivian's social circle full of people with old money and unsophisticated financial knowledge. Your wife was the entry point to a whole new pool of victims. Donovan felt sick. Not because he still loved Ainsley, that had died months ago in small cuts and large silences, but because he could see the wreckage coming and couldn't stop it. Did Ainsley invest with him? Rivera checked his notes, numbers written in neat handwriting that spoke of military discipline from decades past. Your wife put in $15,000 6 months ago. It's gone, transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands 3 weeks after deposit. Her parents? The numbers got worse. Vivian Whitmore had invested $220,000 from her estate trust. Money that had been in her family for generations, managed conservatively, meant to provide security and legacy. Caldwell had put in $165,000 from his retirement account, 40 years at Georgia Pacific pension and 401k combined, invested with a man his daughter was dating because that man went to Wharton and talked about sophisticated investment strategies and seemed to know what he was doing. Combined Whitmore parental loss, $385,000. Rivera kept reading. Sloan and Preston put in $48,000. Wedding fund, most likely. 3 Whitmore cousins, $180,000 combined. 5 family friends from the country club, $290,000. The arithmetic was brutal. Total Whitmore family circle exposure, $908,000, almost $1 million about to vanish into federal seizure and bankruptcy proceedings. Rivera pulled out another document. FBI and SEC are coordinating. Arrests coming within 2 weeks. Ford's been moving money offshore, but they've frozen the accounts they can reach. He's going to prison, Donovan. Question is how many years? Should I warn them? Ainsley's family? Rivera's look suggested he'd anticipated the question. Would Vivian believe you? You're the grease monkey who just showed them up. You think she'll take financial advice from someone she's been looking down on for 9 years? Valid point. Vivian's pride was armor that facts would bounce off until reality hit hard enough to penetrate. Besides, Ford's attorney will notify clients when the indictment comes. It's standard procedure. They'll find out. Donovan sat with the information, processing implications. Ainsley was about to lose everything she'd left him for, the wealthy boyfriend, the Napa trips, the St. Bart's house that probably didn't exist, the Paris plans that would never materialize. All of it smoke and mirrors built on stolen money that federal investigators were currently cataloging as evidence. Rivera's voice softened. Donovan, they made their choices. Vivian chose to demean you for 9 years. Ainsley chose Ford over you. Caldwell chose to stay silent while his wife belittled you at every family gathering. They chose to invest with a man because he looked successful rather than because he was trustworthy. Paused, weighing words. Sometimes people learn lessons the hard way. Sometimes that's the only way they learn at all. The next morning brought routine. Donovan flew Senator Drummond's return charter to D.C. Smooth flight through clear skies. Conversation in the cockpit about aviation and politics and the strange intersection between public service and private privilege. $9,500 check deposited Monday afternoon, adding to accounts that were growing better than Donovan had projected even in optimistic scenarios. Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m., FBI and SEC agents raided the offices of Kensington and Trask. 23 agents with warrants and boxes, seizing computers and files and freezing accounts. Ford was arrested at his apartment, not the Buckhead high-rise he'd implied he owned, but a rental in Midtown he'd been 3 months behind on. Bail set at $850,000, which he couldn't make because his accounts were frozen and his assets were either fictional or borrowed. The indictment listed 44 counts: wire fraud, securities fraud, investment advisor fraud, money laundering. Evidence ran to 6,000 pages. Fake account statements generated in Photoshop showing returns that never existed. Ponzi-style payment ledgers where Client A's returns came from Client B's principal. Offshore wire transfers to Cayman accounts totaling $1.7 million. The mathematics of theft laid bare in spreadsheets and bank records. Whitmore Family Investments appeared on the victim list. Ainsley, $15,000. Vivian, $220,000. Caldwell, $165,000. Sloan and Preston, $48,000. Extended family and friends, $460,000. Total, $908,000. Every penny gone evaporated into offshore accounts and Ford's lifestyle maintenance, and the fundamental mathematics of Ponzi schemes that eventually collapsed under their own weight. News hit Atlanta social circles by 9 a.m. Tuesday. Text messages spread like contagion. Phone calls to attorneys. Emergency family meetings. The kind of chaos that came when people realized they'd been robbed by someone they'd trusted because he had the right credentials and went to the right schools and looked like success. Vivian called Ainsley at 9:23 a.m. The conversation lasted 14 minutes. Imani heard about it later through Atlanta's interconnected network of people who knew things. Vivian's voice reaching levels that neighbors could hear through walls. How could you not know? How could you bring this criminal into our family? Ainsley's attempts at defense fell flat. She didn't know. Ford seemed legitimate. Wharton degree, family firm, country club membership, all the markers. He seemed rich. That's all you cared about. And now your father's retirement is gone. 40 years at Georgia Pacific gone because you were too busy being embarrassed by your husband to notice your boyfriend was a thief. Caldwell's voice in the background trying to de-escalate, taking responsibility for his own investment decision. But Vivian was beyond reason, beyond fairness, deep into the territory where someone had to be blamed, and Ainsley was available. Sloan's text to Ainsley came at 11:47 a.m., screenshot forwarded by someone who knew someone. Preston's parents are threatening to call off the wedding. They think we were in on Ford's scheme because we introduced him to their friends. Thanks for ruining my life. Whitmore Cousins retained an attorney by Wednesday, exploring whether they could sue Ainsley for introducing the fraudster, whether proximity to the crime created liability even without knowledge. The country club suspended Whitmore family membership pending investigation. The club itself had lost $180,000 in member funds invested with Ford. By Thursday, Ainsley had called Donovan 23 times. He watched the phone light up, her name on the screen, the desperate persistence of someone who'd run out of options. He didn't answer. Wasn't cruelty, just boundary setting. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't make things worse. She left a voicemail Thursday night at 9:34 p.m. Voice broken, crying, barely coherent. Donovan, please, I know I don't deserve your help. I know what I did. I know how I treated you. But my family, Ford took everything. My dad's retirement is gone. He's 62 years old. Mom's estate trust is gone. The FBI says we won't recover anything because it's offshore. Pause for breath, trying to control crying. There's more. Ford's attorney is trying to blame me, saying I recruited investors. The FBI wants to interview me. They think I was part of it. They think I knew. Longer pause. Sound of something breaking in the background, maybe glass. I just need help. I don't know who else to call. Everyone thinks I was in on it. My family won't talk to me. Sloan says I ruined her wedding. Mom says... The voicemail cut off at the 3-minute limit. Donovan listened twice, deleted it. Not out of satisfaction, but out of necessity. He couldn't carry her crisis when he'd tried warning her 8 months ago and been told he didn't understand sophisticated investing. Friday morning at 11 a.m., Ainsley appeared at PDK Airport. Took an Uber because her Lexus had been repossessed Wednesday. Turns out Ford had co-signed the loan, and when his accounts froze, the auto lender pulled the vehicle. Security wouldn't let her past the FBO lobby. Called up to operations. Donovan came down because Rivera insisted, said it was the right thing to do even when the right thing felt heavy. She looked destroyed, hair unwashed, makeup smeared, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual designer armor, hands shaking around a coffee cup from the vending machine that had gone cold while she waited. Donovan, please, just 5 minutes. They sat in the lobby chairs bolted to the floor, designed to prevent theft but also to prevent comfort. Appropriate setting for this conversation. My dad is going to lose everything. The house on Tuxedo Road, his retirement, 40 years of work, gone. My mom's trust fund that's been in her family for 3 generations. Ford's lawyer is saying I helped him, that I recruited investors knowingly. I'm sorry. That's terrible. The response came out automatic, genuine sympathy for suffering without accepting responsibility for causing it. Donovan, please, a loan, anything. I'll sign anything, work it off. I just need help keeping my dad's house. He doesn't deserve to lose. Ainsley, stop. She stopped. I warned you 8 months ago. I told you Ford's investment fund sounded too good to be true. I said 12% guaranteed returns were impossible in legitimate markets. Her hand went to her mouth. Memory returning. Donovan pulled out his phone again, found texts from 8 months ago, showed her screen. His message from last April. Ainsley, I looked into Ford's fund. The returns don't make mathematical sense. No legitimate investment guarantees 12% annually. This feels wrong. Please don't invest your family's money until you get a second opinion from someone not connected to Ford. Her response 4 hours later. Donovan, you work on airplanes. Ford went to Wharton. I think he understands finance better than you. Stay in your lane. She stared at the screen like it was evidence in a trial where she was both defendant and judge. I stayed in my lane. You ignored the warning. You invested. You brought him to family events. You introduced him to your mother's social circle. Those were your choices, Ainsley, not mistakes. Choices. His voice stayed level, factual, no satisfaction in being right about this particular thing. So that's it? You'll just watch my family suffer? What would you have me do? Write a check for $200,000 to save your mother's estate after she spent 9 years treating me like I wasn't good enough to breathe her air? Save Caldwell's retirement after he sat silent at every family dinner while Vivian made jokes about industrial aromas and trade schools? Ainsley flinched. They made choices too. They chose to invest based on credentials rather than due diligence. They chose Ford because he looked right, talked right, went to the right school. They chose appearance over substance. Now they're learning what that choice costs. Stood to leave. This conversation was over. Ford's lawyer is trying to make me a co-defendant. He says I recruited investors through social connections. The FBI is investigating me, Donovan. They think I took kickbacks. They think I'm guilty. He stopped, turned back. Did you take any money, any commissions, any kickbacks, anything? No, I lost my own money. I'm a victim too. The desperation in her voice carried truth. She'd been stupid, not criminal, foolish, not fraudulent. Get a lawyer, a real one, federal white-collar defense. Pulled out his phone, forwarded a contact. Martin Sheridan, best federal defense attorney in Atlanta. Tell him I referred you. He'll take your case. Ainsley stared at her phone where the contact had appeared. You'd do that, after everything? I'm not helping you. I'm helping an innocent person not go to jail for something they didn't do. There's a difference. She started to speak. He cut her off. And Ainsley, I'm going to call the federal prosecutor and give a statement. You didn't know about Ford's fraud. You lost your own money. You're a victim, not a co-conspirator. I'll make that clear. Why? Because it's true. And because being foolish isn't criminal. You made bad choices, but they were legal bad choices. I won't let you go to prison for Ford's crimes. Left her sitting in the lobby with cold coffee and a defense attorney's contact information. Walked back upstairs to the operations office where Rivera was reviewing flight schedules. You did the right thing. Doesn't feel right. Feels complicated. Most right things are. 3 weeks passed. Ford's attorney tried to flip blame onto Ainsley, claiming she'd knowingly recruited investors in exchange for under-the-table payments. Federal investigators interviewed her twice. Sheridan, the defense attorney Donovan had recommended, presented evidence methodically. Ainsley's own financial losses. Text messages showing she'd believed Ford's claims. No paper trail of kickbacks, no offshore accounts in her name. No evidence of knowledge beyond what Ford had told her along with everyone else. Donovan's statement to federal prosecutors carried weight. He explained the timeline, the warnings he'd given, Ainsley's genuine belief in Ford's legitimacy. Prosecutors looked at the evidence and decided Ainsley was a victim of fraud rather than a participant in it. Charges never filed. Ford went to trial in federal court 3 months later. Convicted on 38 of 44 counts. Sentencing, 11 years federal prison, $4.2 million in restitution that would never be recovered because the money was gone, burned through lifestyle maintenance and offshore accounts that had already been emptied into other offshore accounts in an endless shell game. Asset seizure revealed the truth. The Porsche Cayenne was leased, payments 3 months behind. The Kiowa condo was also leased, not owned. The vintage car collection was financed through a specialty lender, vehicles already repossessed. Ford had been broke for years, living on stolen client funds, maintaining the appearance of wealth through systematic theft. The life Ainsley had left Donovan for had never existed. It was smoke and mirrors and borrowed time, and now time had run out. Vivian called Donovan in week 4, voice different, smaller, stripped of the commanding resonance that had dominated every room she'd ever entered. They met at Piedmont Park on a bench overlooking Lake Claramere. Saturday morning, cold enough that their breath made clouds, isolated enough that no one would overhear. She arrived by Uber, no Mercedes, wearing jeans and a sweater he'd never seen. The armor was gone. What remained looked human, vulnerable, maybe even sorry. Donovan, I owe you an apology, a substantial one. Mrs. Whitmore, you don't. I do. Please let me finish. She took a breath that seemed to hurt. I judged you from the moment Ainsley brought you to Thanksgiving 9 years ago. I saw a black man with a blue-collar job and decided, without knowing anything real about you, that you weren't good enough for my daughter. The confession came out practiced, like she'd rehearsed in mirrors. I pushed Ainsley toward Ford because he looked like success. Wharton degree, family firm, country club membership. All the markers I was taught to value, all the boxes that mattered to people like me. And I was so focused on those markers that I missed what you were actually building. Her hands twisted in her lap, no jewelry, no manicure, just weathered fingers that looked older than they should. Caldwell and I are losing the house. We've listed it. Moving to a rental in Tucker next month. 2-bedroom townhouse. Retirement's gone. 40 years of careful saving. Gone because I trusted credentials over character. I'm sorry that happened. Don't be sorry. Be right, which you were. She showed him text messages on her phone. Conversation between Ainsley and herself from 8 months ago. Donovan's warning forwarded. Ford's fund sounds like a Ponzi scheme. Please don't invest your parents' money. The returns are mathematically impossible for legitimate investments. Vivian's response to Ainsley. Donovan is being paranoid. He doesn't understand high-level finance. Ford went to Wharton. I'm investing. Donovan stared at the screen. He'd tried. They'd ignored him. Simple as that. Ainsley told me you were jealous of Ford's success, that you didn't understand sophisticated investing. I believed her because believing her meant I could keep believing you weren't good enough. The honesty landed heavy. I'm not here to ask for money. I know I have no right. I'm here to ask something else. He waited. The FBI investigation. They're looking at Ainsley because Ford's lawyer is claiming she was complicit. Would you provide a character statement, something the prosecutors could use? I already did. Called the prosecutor's office 4 days ago. Gave a 2-hour statement. Ainsley had no knowledge of Ford's fraud. She lost her own money. She's a victim. Vivian's expression shifted through surprise to something like wonder. You did that. I don't want Ainsley to go to prison for being foolish. Foolish isn't criminal. Silence between them, broken by duck calls from the lake and distant traffic on Piedmont. Vivian stood to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, Donovan, you were always good enough. Better than we deserved. I was just too proud and too prejudiced to see it. She paused, weighing her next words. Caldwell wanted me to tell you he's ashamed of how he stayed silent, how he let me treat you. He says you're the man he hoped Ainsley would marry, the man he would have been proud to call son. And we destroyed it. Tell Caldwell I hope the rental works out. Tell him retirement doesn't have to mean stopping, just means doing different work. You're kinder than I deserve. I'm just someone who knows the difference between pride and character. You're learning it. That's something. She walked away. Donovan sat watching ducks paddle across water that reflected sky without judgment, without memory, without keeping score of who deserved what. 1 month after Ford's conviction, Donovan sat in Rivera's office reviewing expansion proposals. The company had acquired 2 additional Gulfstream G2800s, demand outpacing capacity, wealthy clients discovering that Peachtree executives' safety record and service quality justified premium pricing. Revenue projections showed 47% year-over-year growth. Numbers that would have seemed impossible when Donovan first started turning wrenches in this hangar 9 years ago. Rivera pushed a document across the desk. Retirement announcement drafted for the board. 18 months. That's my timeline. Then it's your company, Donovan. Majority ownership, CEO position, the whole operation. The weight of succession felt real now. Tangible. No longer abstract future, but approaching present. Donovan would be 37 when Rivera retired, running an aviation company valued north of $15 million, employing 23 people whose mortgages and car payments and children's college funds depended on smart decisions made in this office. His phone buzzed. Text from Taryn. Coffee after your shift? Want to hear about the GSW case from last night? Taryn Ashford, trauma surgeon at Grady Hospital. 34 years old with dark skin and steady hands that had saved more lives than Donovan had logged flight hours. They'd met 6 weeks ago on a medical charter, her traveling with a pediatric patient needing specialist care in Nashville. She'd asked intelligent questions about aircraft systems, watched him run pre-flight checks with genuine fascination rather than polite tolerance. "I love watching you work," she'd said during cruise at 38,000 feet, unexpected honesty in the cockpit darkness. "You're so precise, so calm, it's attractive." First time someone had found his competence attractive rather than dismissive. First time grease under his nails felt like proof of capability instead of evidence of limitation. They'd been dating 5 weeks now. Slow, careful, both of them carrying relationship wreckage that made trust something earned rather than assumed. She knew about Ainsley, the divorce, the humiliation dinner that had turned into vindication. He knew about her ex-fiancé who'd cheated during her surgical residency, the special kind of betrayal that happened when you were working 100-hour weeks saving lives and someone decided that wasn't enough. "Coffee sounds good. 6 p.m. at Octane?" Same place he'd met Ainsley 9 years ago. Different person sitting across from him, different version of himself occupying the chair. Geography repeated, but context transformed. That evening at Octane, Taryn arrived still wearing scrubs, hair pulled back, exhaustion around her eyes that came from 36 hours in the OR. She ordered black coffee, no sugar, the kind of fuel that kept surgeons functional through impossible shifts. 3 GSLWs in 4 hours, gang shooting in Vine City, 17-year-old didn't make it, other 2 stable but long recovery. She talked about trauma the way Donovan talked about aircraft maintenance, clinical detail masking emotional weight, professional distance creating space to function without breaking. He understood the mechanism because he used it himself every time he signed off an aircraft, knowing lives depended on his inspection being thorough. "How was your day?" She shifted gears deliberately, compartmentalizing work to make room for life. "Good. Rivera officially announced his retirement timeline. 18 months, then I'm majority owner." "That's huge. How do you feel?" "Terrified. Excited. Both." She smiled, tired but genuine. "That's probably the right reaction. If you weren't terrified, you'd be too arrogant to succeed. If you weren't excited, you'd be in the wrong field." They talked about expansion plans, hiring decisions, whether to add a 3rd Learjet or invest in a larger Gulfstream for international routes. She asked smart questions that revealed business acumen beyond her medical training. Turned out her father had run a manufacturing company in Birmingham, taught her about cash flow and capital allocation over dinner table conversations growing up. An hour into coffee, Ainsley walked in. Pure coincidence. Mathematical probability in a city of millions that 2 people would be in the same coffee shop at the same moment. She was with Sloan, both of them carrying shopping bags from Lenox Square, conversation stopping when Ainsley saw Donovan. Their existence in the same physical space created awkwardness that spread like turbulence. Ainsley's face cycled through emotions too fast to catalog. Surprise, recognition, something that might have been regret or might have been assessment of the woman sitting across from Donovan. Sloan pulled Ainsley toward a table on the opposite side of the shop, strategic retreat, but the damage was done. The evening had shifted from comfortable to complicated. Taryn noticed, of course. Surgeons were trained observers. "That her?" "Yeah. She looks miserable." Donovan glanced over. Ainsley did look different. Thinner, tired, wearing clothes from Target instead of Nordstrom. Hair pulled back in a functional ponytail rather than styled perfection. The markers of someone whose life had contracted rather than expanded. "She lost her job. Agency didn't want the Ford Association. She's working retail at Lenox now, I heard through mutual acquaintances." Taryn's expression carried neither judgment nor sympathy, just observation. "And her family? Parents lost everything. Moved to Tucker. Father's working part-time at Home Depot to cover basic expenses. Sister postponed her wedding indefinitely. Do you feel satisfied, seeing her like that?" The question came without accusation, genuine curiosity about his emotional state. Donovan considered it honestly. "No, I feel nothing. Maybe a little sad for what could have been different if she'd been different, but not satisfied. Satisfaction would require me still being invested in her suffering. I'm just not anymore. Taryn nodded. That's probably healthy. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. They finished coffee and left through the side exit to avoid further awkwardness. Walking to their cars in the parking lot, Taryn's hand found his. For what it's worth, I think she made a terrible mistake, and I'm grateful for it. Why grateful? Because if she hadn't left, you wouldn't be available. And I'm selfish enough to appreciate my good fortune even when it comes from someone else's bad decisions. He kissed her then, parking lot kiss under sodium lights, her lips tasting like coffee and honesty. Different from Ainsley in every measurable way, different felt good. 6 months rolled past like weather, seasons changing, life accumulating new patterns. Donovan's schedule settled into rhythm. 3 days weekly flying charters, 2 days managing maintenance operations, weekends split between business development and actual rest. Revenue continued climbing, client base expanding through referrals, reputation for safety and service spreading through networks of wealth that valued competence over marketing. Taryn's schedule remained brutal, but they found stolen hours between her shifts and his flights. Late dinners at her apartment in Virginia Highland, early breakfasts before she headed to the hospital, occasional full weekends when their calendars aligned. The relationship built slowly, foundation before walls, both of them cautious about repeating past mistakes. She met Rivera in month 3, casual introduction at a company barbecue Donovan hosted for staff and families. Rivera assessed her with the quiet evaluation of someone who'd learned to read people through decades of close-quarters cockpit relationships. She's smart, grounded, doesn't need you to be anything except who you are. His endorsement came later, private conversation in the hangar office. That's rare, don't screw it up. I'm trying not to. Trying's good. Also, propose somewhere meaningful, but not where you proposed to Ainsley. Fresh geography matters. The observation landed with the weight of lived wisdom. Rivera had been married 32 years, knew something about building relationships that lasted beyond initial chemistry. Ainsley appeared in Donovan's awareness occasionally. Unavoidable overlap in a city where social circles intersected. He heard through Amani, who heard through the neighborhood network, that Ainsley had moved to a studio apartment in East Point. $16 an hour at anthropology, trying to rebuild credit destroyed by association with Ford's fraud. Taking business classes at Georgia State 2 nights weekly, attempting to construct a future from wreckage. She'd sent Donovan one text in month 4. Simple, direct. Thank you for the statement to the FBI. My attorney said it was critical. You didn't have to do that, he'd replied after 3 hours of consideration. You didn't deserve to go to jail for being foolish. Hope you're doing okay. No response from her. Maybe nothing left to say, or maybe saying anything would have opened doors better left closed. Either way, the conversation ended there. The Whitmore family reconstruction happened in pieces, information filtering through Atlanta's interconnected gossip networks. Vivian volunteering at Atlanta Community Food Bank. Court-ordered community service from a civil lawsuit settlement with other Ford victims, who'd argued she should have done due diligence before recommending him to friends. The volunteer work had started as punishment but apparently became something else. First real job she'd ever held, first time she'd been accountable to someone rather than directing staff. Caldwell had found unexpected satisfaction in Home Depot work. Imani reported seeing him in the electrical department, helping customers with genuine knowledge from his Air Force days, wearing an orange apron with the same dignity he'd worn his corporate suits. Retirement redefined as different work rather than no work. Sloan had married Preston in a small ceremony, family helping where they could, learning that weddings didn't require $50,000 budgets to be meaningful. The couple had bought a modest house in Decatur, both working normal jobs, building normal lives without trust funds or country club memberships. The Whitmore family was learning what millions of Americans already knew, that you could survive financial catastrophe, that happiness didn't require wealth, that character mattered more than credentials. Hard lessons delivered late, but apparently taking root. Month 9 brought Thanksgiving. Taryn invited Donovan to meet her family in Birmingham, significant step that carried implications about future. He accepted, nervous in ways he hadn't been since his first solo flight, because meeting parents suggested trajectories toward permanence. Her father, Gregory, ran a precision manufacturing company, African-American entrepreneur who'd built something from nothing through 30 years of grinding work. Her mother, Diane, taught high school chemistry, sharp mind that had pushed 3 children through college and medical school. Her younger brother, Marcus, worked as an engineer at Boeing. Thanksgiving dinner at the Ashford house felt different from Whitmore gatherings. Warmer, louder, less concerned with performance, and more focused on actual connection. Gregory asked Donovan about aircraft maintenance with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance, drew parallels to precision manufacturing that revealed deep technical understanding. Diane wanted to know about the physics of flight, turned it into an impromptu lesson for the grandchildren about lift and drag and Bernoulli's principle. No one asked about his father's occupation. No one measured him against inherited wealth. The questions focused on what he'd built, how he'd built it, whether he treated their daughter with respect and kindness. Gregory pulled Donovan aside after dinner. Conversation on the back porch while others cleaned up inside. Birmingham in November. Cold enough for jackets, quiet enough for honesty. Taryn told me about your ex-wife, about what happened. Donovan tensed, unsure where this was heading. Sounds like she couldn't see what she had until it was gone. Her loss. Gregory's voice carried no judgment, just observation. My daughter's been hurt before badly, so I'll say this once and then never again. If you're not serious about her, end it now. But if you are serious, understand that serious means showing up even when it's hard, means choosing her even when easier options exist, means building something that lasts beyond chemistry and convenience. I'm serious. Good, yes. Then you have my blessing. Not that you need it. Taryn makes her own decisions, but it matters to her that we approve, so know that we do. They shook hands, understanding passing between them that didn't require additional words. Flying back to Atlanta Sunday evening, Taryn in the co-pilot seat of the Citation, Donovan teaching her basic controls the way he'd promised, she asked the question that had been building. What are we doing, Donovan? Long term, I mean. He could have deflected, made jokes, bought time. Instead, he told the truth. I'm building toward asking you to marry me. Not today, not next week. But that's the direction I'm heading. Wanted you to know so you can decide if that's a direction you're interested in traveling. She was quiet for 30 seconds, hands steady on the yoke, eyes forward on the horizon. Then, I'm interested, very interested, but I need you to understand something about me. Okay. I won't be a wife who gets introduced as works at the hospital. I won't be minimized or made smaller to make you feel bigger. I need a partner who sees me as equal, who's proud of what I do, who doesn't compete with my success. I wouldn't ask you to be anything except exactly who you are. That's the person I'm falling in love with. The words surprised him as much as her, honesty arriving before he'd planned its delivery. But once spoken, they felt right, true, ready to exist in the space between them. Good, because I'm falling in love with you too, and I won't repeat my last relationship any more than you'll repeat yours. They flew the rest of the route in comfortable silence, understanding established, foundation solid enough to support whatever came next. 1 year after the humiliation dinner that became vindication, Donovan received an unexpected call. Caldwell Whitmore, voice hesitant, asking if they could meet. Not at Vivian's request, he clarified immediately. This was personal. They met at a diner off Moreland Avenue, neutral territory, nowhere that carried history for either of them. Caldwell arrived looking older but somehow more substantial. Orange Home Depot shirt under his jacket, hands that had calluses now instead of just age spots. I won't take much of your time, just needed to say something I should have said 9 years ago. Donovan waited. I was a coward. Every time Vivian belittled you, every time she made those comments about blue-collar work or your father's career, every family dinner where she treated you like you didn't belong, I said nothing. I let it happen because speaking up would have meant conflict, and I'd spent 35 years of marriage avoiding conflict with my wife. The confession came out practiced but genuine. You were good to my daughter. You worked hard, built something real, treated her with respect, and we all looked down on you because you didn't come from the right zip code, didn't have the right pedigree. I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed I stayed silent. Donovan absorbed this, unsure what response was appropriate. Caldwell continued. Losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to us. I know that sounds insane, but working at Home Depot, helping people fix their houses, solving problems with my hands, I'm happier than I was running marketing campaigns at Georgia Pacific. Vivian volunteers 40 hours a week now, actually helping people instead of just attending charity galas. We talk to each other instead of performing for each other. He met Donovan's eyes directly. We had to lose everything we thought mattered to discover what actually mattered. I wish we'd learned that lesson differently. I wish we'd learned it from you instead of from federal prosecutors, but here we are. I appreciate you saying this. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just wanted you to know that I see it now. See who you were, who you are, see what Ainsley lost, see my part in that loss. Caldwell stood, left $40 on the table for coffee and pie. Neither of them had finished. You're building something good with that doctor. Vivian saw you two at a restaurant last month, said you looked happy, really happy. I hope that works out for you. Thank you. And Donovan, for what it's worth, you were always the kind of man I hoped Ainsley would marry. I was just too proud to see it, too invested in appearances. That was my failure, not yours. He left. Donovan sat in the diner booth processing the conversation, wondering what forgiveness looked like when offered to people who'd caused harm through slunts rather than action. Caldwell hadn't been cruel, just absent, complicit through passivity. Maybe that deserved grace. Maybe everyone deserved the chance to grow past who they'd been. Ainsley appeared in his life one final time 6 weeks later. Unplanned encounter at Whole Foods on a Saturday morning. Donovan was shopping for dinner ingredients. Taryn coming over that evening, attempting a recipe neither of them would probably execute well, but the attempt mattered. Ainsley stood in the produce section loading store-brand items into her cart, budget shopping visible in every choice. She saw him, froze, then made the decision to approach rather than avoid. Donovan, hi. Ainsley. Awkward silence, other shoppers flowing around them like water around stones. How are you? Her voice carried genuine curiosity rather than social performance. Good, really good, actually. You? I'm okay. Working, surviving, learning things I should have learned a long time ago. She looked different beyond the obvious financial markers. Something in her posture, less performance, more substance. Like she'd stopped auditioning for a role and started inhabiting reality. I heard you got cleared by the FBI. I'm glad. Thank you for that. Your statement. My attorney said it made the difference between charges and freedom. You didn't deserve to go to prison for Ford's crimes. No, but I deserved consequences for my choices, and I'm living them. She gestured at her cart, her Target clothes, her entire diminished situation. Retail therapy used to mean shopping. Now it means working retail. Funny how words change meaning. The observation carried self-awareness that hadn't existed before. Donovan, I know this is uncomfortable, but I learned something, and you tried to teach me for 9 years, and I finally learned it. What's that? Worth isn't what you own or drive or where you vacation. It's what you build, how you treat people, whether you show up when it's hard. Her voice carried weight that sounded like therapy homework becoming actual belief. Ford had everything I thought I wanted. The pedigree, the wealth, the status symbols. But he was hollow, empty, built on lies. She met his eyes directly. You were exactly who you appeared to be. Solid, real, building something that mattered, and I couldn't see it because I was measuring with the wrong ruler. I hope you find that for yourself, someone who sees you clearly. I'm working on it. Therapy twice a week, real job, no shortcuts, actually earning what I have instead of expecting it delivered. Pause. And Donovan, I saw you with someone. Doctor, I heard. She looks at you the way I should have looked at you. Like she sees who you actually are. I hope she makes you happy. She does? Good. You deserve that. You always deserved that. They parted without additional words, conversation complete, nothing left requiring resolution. Donovan watched her push her cart toward the registers, wondering if people could change or just learn to perform change convincingly. Decided it didn't matter which, as long as the performance lasted long enough to become reality. That evening, with Taryn cooking together in his kitchen, he told her about the encounter. How did it feel seeing her like that? Sad, not for her specifically, just sad that people have to lose everything to learn what matters. Sad that 9 years ended because she couldn't see past appearance. But also grateful, because if she hadn't left, I wouldn't have you. Taryn stopped chopping vegetables, turned to face him. Donovan, I need to tell you something. I'm being recruited by Emory, Chief of Trauma Surgery, significant promotion, significant increase in administrative responsibility. His chest tightened, anticipating loss. That's amazing. When would you start? That's the thing. I'd be starting immediately, which means less time for us. More 80-hour weeks, more stress, more of me being unavailable. He understood what she was really asking. Whether he could handle being with someone whose career demanded as much as his did. Whether he'd resent her success the way some men did. Whether he was strong enough to be with someone equally driven. Taryn, take the job. You've earned it. You'll be brilliant at it. And I'll be here, proud of you, supporting you, understanding when you have to cancel plans because someone's bleeding out in the OR. That's who you are. I'm not dating you despite your career. I'm attracted to you because of it. Relief crossed her face. You mean that? Completely. I watched my ex-wife need me to be smaller so she could feel bigger. I won't do that to you, ever. You build your career as high as it goes, and I'll build mine, and we'll figure out how two ambitious people make a life together. She kissed him then, kitchen kiss that tasted like olive oil and promise. Ask me. What? Whatever you've been thinking about asking. Ask me now. He hadn't planned this moment. Didn't have a ring. Wasn't at some scenic location with sunset and violins. Just two people in a kitchen with half-chopped vegetables and a bottle of wine they'd forgotten to open. Taryn Ashford, will you marry me? Not because I'm romantic or prepared or have this planned out, but because I love who you are. I love what you're building, and I want to build a life with you that honors both of our ambitions instead of competing with them. Yes. Absolutely yes. They didn't finish cooking dinner. Ordered pizza instead, sat on his couch planning a future that involved two demanding careers, chaotic schedules, stolen moments between surgeries and flights, and the particular kind of partnership that came from equals choosing each other deliberately. The wedding happened 4 months later, small ceremony at Piedmont Park on a Saturday afternoon when both their schedules briefly aligned. Gregory walked Taryn down the aisle, beaming with the pride of a father who'd raised a daughter strong enough to choose well. Rivera served as Donovan's best man, 30-year friendship earning the honor. Imani stood as bridesmaid, witness to both the wreckage of his first marriage and the careful construction of his second. Vivian and Caldwell attended, surprise appearance arranged through Taryn, who'd reached out believing in redemption or at least in the possibility of people learning from catastrophic mistakes. They sat in the back, dressed simply, witness to the wedding that could have been Ainsley's if she'd been different, If they'd been different, if the whole system of values had been different from the start. Ainsley didn't attend. She sent a card, simple message. Wishing you both every happiness. You deserve it. A gesture that suggested growth, or at least suggested enough self-awareness to know her presence would have been awkward for everyone. The ceremony was brief, officiant reading vows they'd written themselves, promises about showing up and choosing each other and building something that honored both their callings. When the officiant pronounced them married, Donovan kissed his wife, the words still new, still carrying weight, and thought about trajectories, about how lives branched at decision points, about how different his existence was from what it could have been if Ainsley had stayed. Reception at a restaurant in Virginia Highland, close friends and family, no performance, just celebration. Rivera gave a toast about watching Donovan grow from apprentice mechanic to business partner to husband, about recognizing potential before it recognized itself. Gregory spoke about his daughter choosing someone who saw her clearly, who wasn't intimidated by her success, who understood that partnership meant multiplication rather than division. Donovan's toast to Taryn was simple. I spent 9 years with someone who needed me to be smaller. I'm spending the rest of my life with someone who makes me want to be bigger. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for building this with me. They honeymooned in Charleston, long weekends stolen between her surgical schedule and his operational responsibilities. Walked the Battery at sunset, ate oysters at restaurants overlooking water, talked about 5-year plans and whether they wanted children and how to balance 2 careers that both mattered. Sunday evening, flying back to Atlanta, Taryn in the co-pilot seat because he'd been teaching her to fly and she was close to solo certification. She asked about regrets. Do you ever wish things had worked out with Ainsley? Wonder what life would have been like if she'd stayed? He thought about it honestly. No, because if she'd stayed, it would have been for the wrong reasons. For the money, the status, the partnership, not for me. I'd have spent the rest of my life wondering if I was enough or just enough wealth to satisfy her mother. With you, I never question whether I'm enough. You chose me when I was just a pilot and mechanic building something. The success is bonus, not basis. Good answer. It's a true answer. Wealth without respect is just expensive loneliness. I learned that watching Ford and Ainsley. They had appearance without substance. We're building substance. The appearance will follow or it won't, but either way we'll be okay. Atlanta appeared on the horizon, city lights spreading like circuit boards, home waiting below. Donovan keyed the mic. Atlanta approach. Citation November 7492 Hotel, level 6000, landing Peachtree DeKalb with information Delta. Citation 902 Hotel, Atlanta approach, radar contact, descend and maintain 4000, expect vectors for the visual approach, routine communication, familiar rhythm, life. Continuing in patterns that felt right because they'd been chosen rather than inherited. Taryn's hand found his on the throttle. Brief touch that communicated connection without words. They descended through evening air toward runways Donovan had been landing on for a decade, toward hangars that housed aircraft he now owned, toward a future they were building together with clear eyes and honest hands, and the particular kind of hope that came from people who'd survived failures and learned what mattered. The wheels touched down, smooth, centerline perfect, another successful flight completed. Taxiing toward the ramp, Donovan thought about distance traveled, about the difference between where lives start and where they end up, about the strange mathematics of loss and gain. Ainsley had left him for wealth that never existed. In leaving, she'd given him space to find partnership that did exist. Ford had stolen nearly $1 million from the Whitmore family. In stealing, he'd taught them values that millions of dollars couldn't buy. Vivian had spent 9 years looking down on Donovan. In looking down, she'd missed seeing what was actually being built until federal prosecutors provided perspective. Everyone had learned lessons, some harder than others, some too late to salvage what they'd destroyed, but learned nonetheless. Rivera met them at the hangar, grinning. How was Charleston? Perfect. Short but perfect. Good, because I have news. We just got a contract with the State Department. Diplomatic transport flights, 28 charters annually, premium rates, multi-year commitment. This pushes us over 18 million in annual revenue. The number hit like turbulence, sudden and significant. 18 million. From 8 million when Donovan first became partner to 18 million 4 years later. More than doubling company value through smart operations, quality service, reputation for safety that spread through networks of wealth and power. That's incredible, Matteo. That's your company, Donovan. I'm just keeping it warm until you take over. Rivera's smile carried satisfaction that came from watching something you built continue growing in capable hands. 6 months until I retire. Then it's all yours. Think you're ready? Donovan looked at Taryn, who squeezed his hand, looked at the hangars housing aircraft he maintained and flew and now substantially owned, looked at the business he'd built from grease-stained hands and patient years and refusal to accept other people's definitions of his worth. Yeah, I'm ready. That night in their new house in Virginia Highland, purchased together with combined income from trauma surgery and aviation operations, Taryn asleep beside him after a long day, Donovan thought about the dinner 1 year ago, the humiliation that Ainsley had planned, the vindication that had unfolded instead. He'd walked into that dinner as someone people dismissed, walked out as someone people recognized. The recognition mattered less than he'd expected. What mattered was building something real with someone who saw him clearly from the start. They tried to teach me my place, he thought. Instead, they learned theirs. The difference? I built mine with my own hands, one flight at a time. They borrowed theirs from people who didn't care about them, and borrowed things always get repossessed. His phone buzzed. Text from Rivera. Forgot to mention, Senator Drummond requested you personally for a flight to London next month. State Department contract, first mission. He still won't fly with anyone else. Donovan smiled in the darkness. Texted back, I'm available. Set the phone down, pulled Taryn closer, drifted towards sleep thinking about London, about international routes, about possibilities that opened when you stopped letting other people define your ceiling. Outside, Atlanta hummed with its million stories of people building and failing and trying again. Inside, two people who'd found each other through the wreckage of past mistakes slept peacefully, building a future one honest choice at a time. The invisible work that mattered, the steady hands that built what lasted, the quiet recognition that came from knowing your worth regardless of who else saw it. Donovan had learned what Ainsley never could, that true wealth wasn't what you owned, it was what you built, how you treated people, whether you showed up when it was hard, whether you stayed true to who you were even when it cost you relationships with people who needed you to be someone else. He'd stayed true, lost a wife, found a partner, built an empire, discovered peace. Not a bad trade for a postal worker's son with grease under his nails and dreams in his head, and the patience to turn both into something real.